We're putting our money where our mouth is. This is 55 KRC, the talk station, an iHeart radio station.
And now, Real News, RealAction.com. The radio show. Paid for by Jim Condit Jr. for Congress.
Okay, hello everyone. This is Jim Condit Jr. Tonight's show is a little different. In the past, we've always just put on information. Tonight, you can be part maybe of changing history in the next 6 months or so. This is an appeal in our radio ad, which they played right before the show. This is an appeal to the radio ad played on WLW and WKRC, which for people out of the area is a 90-mile radius around Cincinnati. WLW even goes into more places at night, like 38 states. And it's an appeal for anyone in the radio audience who can get a direct message to Donald Trump, to Melania, to Eric or Don Jr. to do so and tell President Trump to come to openlettertodonaldtrump.com and look at the article, President Trump must bring up computer vote fraud. And to do so is to stop the deep state, the shadow government, which Sean Hannity has made that phrase famous, thankfully. The deep state, the shadow government, which I've been talking about since 1979 in public, that he's made the point that they exist, and they will use computer vote fraud to put the Democrats in charge of Congress, and Trump will be impeached if he does not again bring up the rigged elections issues, okay? So, I've never said this on the air before, but by a minor miracle with a small m, in February of 2016 at Marshalltown High School in Iowa, I caught up with candidate Donald Trump for 40 seconds. He was signing autographs. And I got his attention by saying, Mr. Trump, 3 times. There was a big crowd, people getting autographs. I had paid two guys $10 to let me get close enough to the line. And I was kind of between 2 mountain boy Iowa farmers. And I said, I'm the founder of the group Watch the Vote, which caused them, the Republican Party of Iowa, to change the winner from Romney to Santorum in 2012, which happened. I don't know how many, if you follow politics, you may remember 2 weeks after the Iowa caucus, the Iowa GOP was forced to change the winner from Romney to Santorum, a first in U.S. political history, because we at Watch the Vote knew exactly where we're looking. And we hooked up with a guy named Edward True who was begging for help because he saw a computer, the wrong numbers at his little caucus that they counted. So we teamed up with him. We forced the GOP. By the grace of God, Aaron Burnett picked it up on CNN. I guess they like to embarrass the GOP. But the Iowa state deserved to be embarrassed. They deserve to. They're crooks. The Iowa GOP has been crooks against Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul, and probably Donald Trump, too, in 2016. So anyway, they were forced to change the winner, and I don't have time to tell you that story tonight, but it's hilarious. One part of it, the first thing they said when Edward True, we helped him get his thoughts down in what happened in an affidavit, and we sent it out to the news media. The first thing the GOP of Iowa said, Edward True is just a voter. He has no right to comment on the Iowa caucus. That was the first thing they said. Then they backed down and backed down. Finally, they had to change the winner. So Trump looked up from signing autographs at me, and I said to him, I have one page here. It tells you where to go to protect yourself against computer vote fraud, and the watch for fraud in the Iowa caucus. Will you read it? And he reached out, and I reached out to him, and he took it, and he said, I will read it. I'm going to give it to my man here. It looked like a bodyguard that might have been maybe with the FBI formerly. He looked like so I turned to him and I said, you're about to get on the plane to go to Sioux City for another rally or wherever the next rally was. Will you give it to him? It's only one page. And he did a nod like, yes, I will do it, but if you say anything I don't like, I'm going to punch you. I mean, he was a very stern-looking bodyguard, okay? Nice-looking guy, not heavy or anything. But so anyway, so then I look back at Trump, and typical Trump, he's signing autographs again, and he says, how do you think we're doing in Iowa? Now, I'm not a hard guy, but I did my best impersonation of a hard guy because I know Trump is dealing with hard guys all day. So I kind of pointed at him, and I looked him straight in the eye, and I said, "You're doing well, but you got to watch the vote so they don't steal it from you." And I thought in that second, I saw it register in his eyes that, of course, I have to protect myself in contracts. I'm running for president. I got to protect myself against the vote. Okay, so then he put his hands like it's towards the ceiling with his pen. He quit signing. And at that second, you know, that song that they use, you can't always get what you want. That's at the end of all the Trump rallies, right? So at that second, as he was about to say something to me with his hands, palms towards the ceiling, they cranked the music up, and all you could hear was that choir part. You can't always get what you want. Sorry to sing, but that gives you a little bit, if that might give you an idea of that part. And it's a choir, and it's loud. So he said 2 sentences to me then. I couldn't hear what he said, and I just nodded to him, kind of a little semi-salute, and left because I told the kids I would get out of there so they could get their autographs. So I'll never know what he said in that minute, but that's like the end of a bad movie. That's how that ended. Now, a fellow that used to be in one of the Trump operations, who is pictured with Ivanka, and I'm not going to say who it is because this guy played a key role, and he may again in what's coming up. He got it. This is the most national guy that ever got it. He saw our websites, and he started making memes. And he contacted me through his people. Now, I asked to talk to him. He never would talk to me. We always communicated through his people, which is fine. And he said he was working with people that were close to Trump on bringing up this issue. One of the memes this guy made is a great meme. It said, "We are living in a dictatorship enforced by, no, excuse me, we are living in a thinly disguised dictatorship enforced by computer vote fraud." Right on target. We are living in a thinly disguised dictatorship enforced by computer vote fraud. Now, it's not like a dictatorship where they're rounding people up and shooting everybody because of the 300 million guns that are out here. In other words, the dead white old men founding fathers are in their graves, but they've still outsmarted the communists in America. And believe me, we're fighting communism. They're not going to call it that anymore because communism has 100 million deaths on its hands in the last 100 and something years. So this guy was working, he told me that he was working with people that were around the Trump operation. He put out some great memes. He implied that suits were being prepared if Trump kept losing, like they had him showed losing in Iowa, because he was getting the gigantic crowds and nobody else could get a crowd. It was the same as Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012. Only Ron Paul could get big crowds. Same as Pat Buchanan in 1996 and 2000 and 1992. Only Buchanan could get big crowds. And yet they claimed the lackluster Bob Dole, who there's not enough caffeine on the planet to keep you awake during some of Bob Dole's speeches. They claim he won by the computer count. And this is all, we have an easily rigged computer system. So, Gary, I'm going to mention my friend Gary in Texas in just a minute. I got ahead of myself. So this gentleman said he was working with Trump, and in August 1, 2016 in Columbus, Ohio. I think that was the date. Whenever he was in Columbus, Ohio, around July and August, I'm almost sure it was August 1. Trump says in his speech, "I'm afraid they're going to rig the election against me." And if you remember, Trump said that in almost every major speech after that. Now, whether me handing him that paper and telling him he's got to protect himself against future fraud, whether he remembers that, I have no idea. Did it maybe play a part in some case? But however it happened, whether this gentleman in between, who the day after Trump mentioned this, his people emailed me and said, "We got him to do that, now what?" And I said, he's got to say I'm afraid they're going to computer rig the election against me. Now, that never happened in his speeches, but it did happen in his tweet, and I'll get to that in just a second. So he started saying this in every speech, and the media went crazy. Why did they go crazy? Because he was finally bringing up, the first major candidate to do so, that we got a problem with our easily rigged computer systems, okay? We got a problem, okay? Now, so next thing that happens is that Hillary, a week later, says, after Trump brings this up, Hillary says, I'm afraid the Russians are going to hack our system and rig the election against me. So I thought, great, I've been working at this since 1979 and watched the vote. Great, suddenly everybody's talking about computer fraud. And that was the non-existent Russian narrative came up. We'll get to that in a minute. The non-existent did not happen. Russians hacking our computers and doing anything, which they always say, oh, they didn't change any votes. Well, then what did they do? But I'm going to tell you who can rig the elections, and it's not some kid in New Jersey who, in Hackensack, New Jersey, who is in his basement. It is the three companies who count 96% of our counties, 99% of our vote, and I'm going to mention them in just a little bit here. They own the programs. They don't have to hack. This is an issue that cuts from conservatives like me to progressives and liberals like, Debbie Lassignon of Sane Progressive. She's one of the best on this. She says, they own the programs. They don't have to hack. And that is correct. And they're the ones, not the Bushes, not the Clintons. They're the ones who have the means, the motive, and the opportunity to rig elections. So somebody might at this point say, well, how did Trump get elected then? We'll cover that, at least my best guess, without having inside information. But at any rate, so Trump brings this up in almost every speech, okay? Now, how worried was the 5 TV networks who are in this up to their neck? I'm going to get to that too. The Election Night Gatekeepers, which is, we have a website devoted to the Election Night Gatekeepers, the 5 TV networks, AP Wire, and the 3 big vendors we're going to name that you've probably never heard the names of mentioned in one sentence unless you've been to our websites, that counts 99% of our vote on secret computer programs, hired by 96% of our counties. The 3 now, and then we have another thing we'll get to about a corporation that's owned by the 5 TV networks that 99% of Americans have never heard of. Why have they never heard of it? Because the 5 TV networks and New York Times and all the fake media are hiding it from you. And Fox, I always say, the news department is the fake media. They got Hannity, Tucker, and Laura Ingraham that are doing excellent jobs, but the news department is every bit as corrupt as they are at the other 4 TV networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and Fox News Department also. So anyway, so this goes on, and how can Trump challenge our unimpeachable election? You know, these people in the media are basically de facto communists. They don't like anybody to be skeptical of government anymore. Well, the founding fathers always said to be skeptical. They were like Ronald Reagan's trust but verify back then. They always encouraged skepticism of the government or people in power. And if I was in power, which I've never succeeded to get elected, if I was counting the vote, I would encourage you all to be skeptical of me. You don't just say, oh, that guy served this organization for all his life. How dare you? So they were screaming about Trump, even making people think about the vote count. Okay, so now we get to October 26th, 2016, 12 days before the election, roughly. And it hits the local news in Austin, Texas, in Maryland, and in Colorado. In the early voting, the touch screen, some places have only touch screens, no paper ballot. What could be more of an insult to the American people's intelligence than that? But these areas all had touch screens, no paper ballots, no way to verify the bleep of energy. But anyway, it hits the news. It hits the local news, and it hits internet news big time. And on that night from 9 to 10 p.m. on his show, Hannity covers the fact that people are hitting Trump, and when they check their ballot on the screen, because there's no paper ballot, it's switched it to Hillary. They're hitting Trump, and the vote is being switched inside the computers to Hillary. And by a tremendous programming glitch by one of these companies, ES&S, Election System and Software, by a tremendous programming glitch, they let the people see what was happening inside the computer. So this hits the news. Hannity covers it. Newt Gingrich was the guest on when he covered it. They both agreed this is very concerning. Few hours later, I don't really know, on the East Coast, it was August 26th or August 27th, Donald Trump tweets to his, at that time I think it was 17 million followers, and he tweets what we finally wanted to get out there, and that is the computers are switching, the touchscreen computers are switching votes from Trump to Hillary. So that gets out there to 17 million people and beyond. Now it's out there that it's actually happening during the early voting, okay? So Trump does he might have just had, like they say, he might have had a super big ego and just wanted to win. But whatever reason, he did what we were trying to get all the other good presidential candidates to do over the last 20 years, and he brings it up, and now it's in the public discussion. The press, the big press, fake press, but they sometimes issue polls to alert themselves. So they issued a poll a few days before the election that said 81% of Trump supporters think that they're going to rig the election against him. I don't know. I'm sure they had a very vague idea of how that would happen. I don't have a vague idea. I'm going to tell you exactly who needs to be investigated. But that thing showed them they got problems. They got problems. And we'll go into why, the 4 factors that I think caused the ruling elite, the deep state, the shadow government to stand down and let Trump's victory stand. They could have easily stolen it from him. But at 9 p.m. on election night, something happened that told me, okay, they decided to stand down. So anyway, what happens next? The 5 TV networks, who ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and Fox, who are in this up to their necks since 1988 and before, in this what is really a slightly open conspiracy against the American people, because they claim they're the news media and they don't tell the people. They're using our public airwaves and they don't tell the people what the information they need to know so that people can react. In the last 2 debates, there were 3 debates between Hillary and Trump. And in the second debate, the last question was from Lester Holt of NBC, only asked to Trump, not asked to Hillary. And the question was, will you accept the election results? How worried were the 5 controllers of these networks that they're asking Trump this question in public? And he gave kind of a vague answer. Okay, the third debate, the last debate, Chris Wallace of Fox News, in the second last question, again, doesn't ask Hillary, ask only Trump. Will you accept the election results? And Trump this time gave the exact right answer. He said, I will wait to see the evidence. I'll keep you in suspense. That meant potential lawsuits. That meant potential depositions. Okay, so they knew they had problems on that front. And Trump, as I say, maybe it's because of his big ego. I don't care. He brought it up, and he's now warning them. I'll wait to see the evidence. I'll keep you in suspense whether I accept these results. Okay, so let me just quickly go through the 4 factors that I think caused the ruling elite, the deep state, the shadow government. Ed, I'm going to wait till later because I got to explain to you some other things here so you'll understand the significance of how easily they could have stolen it from Trump and how they had to make a conscious decision to let him have it. So what this show is mainly about is the things that Trump needs to bring up in public this time so that the computer fraud syndicate, the Election Night Gatekeepers, do not put the Democrats, that's what I call the ones at the top like Schumer and Hillary, the Democrats in control of Congress, and if they're in control of Congress and the Senate, at that point, Trump will be impeached. So we're asking on our radio ads, which you may have heard. If not, we'll be playing them next week, and we'll put it up on the open letter to DonaldTrump.com website this week so you can hear it. We're asking anybody in WLW and WKRC Radio Land who knows anybody who can get to Trump to tell him to look at the first article at open letter to DonaldTrump.com and the short 6 audios that go behind the paragraph for each point. And then also this show will also be up there as within within the next few days, okay? So, sorry about the coughing. Okay, so here's the points that Trump needs to bring up. And I realize this is a Hail Mary pass. It literally, I'm a Catholic, so literally we're saying Hail Marys, and is really what they call in football a Hail Mary pass. We know how unlikely it is that it's just maybe, I don't know what, it's a very small percentage that we can get to Trump. But through one of you who knows somebody, I mean, this is a chance. Email, if Laura Ingraham or Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity or Roger Stone or a lot of these people, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, get emails saying, go to look at openlettertodonaldtrump.com, the first article, okay, then we might get to Trump. He does watch TV. He does watch websites. And then he might bring one of these 6 things up or all of them up. Any of them is devastating for the shadow government, ruining our country. And the shadow government's main weapon is control of the 5 TV networks and AP Wire, which gives the national news to all the local papers like the Houston Chronicle or the Cincinnati Enquirer. And they give all the news to them. And then really even greater than that is the ability to rig the computer elections through 3 companies that I'm going to tell you about in just a minute. So the first thing that so you can be part of changing history here. You can be part of changing history by working with us over the next 6 months and getting Trump and other candidates who need to bring this up to bring it up, okay? We're going to take a break, I guess, in about 6 minutes, something like that. So I'm going to tell you real quickly who I am, because I rarely ever do that. Because when I am covered in the media, CNN attacked me twice for 2 minutes back in December, 2 minutes in the afternoon, 2 minutes at night, two minutes just attacking me, which is they were trying to hurt somebody else because I'm not famous, I'm not known. But when the media does cover me, they smear me, okay? And they want you to think, well, yeah, this guy, he's an odd duck, he's maybe on the verge of being a terrorist or something, you know. I went to school in Cincinnati, Ohio at St. Margaret of Cartona Grade School, St. Xavier High School, Xavier University. I then ran a business for 15 years, which was a printing business, T-shirt business, and we got the last time a little guy got the contract without paying anything out front, a contract. We got a contract with Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, Joe Morgan, and Tony Perez. And we did their T-shirts in 74, 75, 76, the greatest years the Reds have had, just by chance. So at any rate, then I went into other things and ended up doing resistance politics, you might say, from the right, fighting since 1979 because I knew they had the election system largely rigged through computers potentially, and by 88 it was perfected. We had 49 and a half states, only exempting half of New Hampshire. That was only exempting half of New Hampshire. That was that was not counted. It was hand-counted, paper ballots by the people, as it used to be, mostly for the first 180 years of our country. So the first point anyway, there's parts of me that are almost a normal guy. That's what I'm saying. I'm one of you. I'm not one of these people who are strewn all throughout the country. We'll get into that next week. In politics, who are, at least because their bread is buttered there, is serving the shadow government. And the shadow government, as I've said on other shows in past years, is the international banks, the people who can issue money. You know, they say follow the money in these movies when it's a sports movie. Follow the money. How about let's following the money at the top of the world? And that's the Federal Reserve Board can issue money in secret to all their friends. Goldman Sachs, same way, which is a bank for businesses. People don't know that. It's a money issuing bank for businesses. International Monetary Fund. And there is a website there's a YouTube video called The Secret of Oz by Bill Still. And look at that video, 90 minutes, The Secret of Oz by Bill Still. And that tells you all about the money masters and the shadow government, who obviously has the money to prop up all these things, including buy all the networks and local TV stations by now, including having the 3 companies that are counting 96% of our vote. So, Mrs. Producer, are we about to go to the break? Is that going to be at 10:30? Okay, so we got just a few seconds. So we're going to tell you what Trump needs to bring up in the next half hour, and we look forward to that. And so we're going to now take a break, and then we're going to come back. So Jim Condit Jr. for Congress here, 2nd District. We'll be back in a minute.
55 KRC. Available anywhere you go on the iHeartRadio app. Downloading. Download it now. This is NBC News on 55 KRC, the talk station.
NBC News Radio, I'm Monica Nelson. U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
This is 55 KRC, an iHeart radio station.
The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of 55 KRC, the talk station, an iHeart radio station.
You are listening to
Real News, RealAction.com. The radio show. Paid for by Jim Condit Jr. for Congress.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Jim Condit Jr. for Congress, 2nd District, 2018. And that's 2nd District of Ohio, for those of you around the country. Okay, so here's what President Trump needs to bring up. One or more, preferably all these, in speeches. This alone will allow us to get a real result in November, which I cannot believe the American people, the great middle class, wants to go back to the vomit and anti-Americanism of Barack Obama. And for those who don't see that was happening, we got to try to pull people over, and we got to try to talk for the people that do understand that it's happening. So the first thing is hand-counted paper ballots. The goal is, in the first phase of the count, is hand-counted paper ballots, okay, by real people at the precinct. And that's the neighborhood polling place. And here's the second part of that. Before the ballots leave the public site. Okay? So the first step is paper ballots, hand-counted paper ballots by real people from that neighborhood precinct, and they counted before the ballots or the ballot box leave the public site. Two parts. Having paper ballots like we have now in Ohio, and they take it away from us right as we vote, and you can never get at them again, that means nothing. They can rig the computer. You can't get at the ballots. I'm going to go into some examples of that in real important races in the last few years and the last year. So Trump should bring up, that's the goal. That's the goal in the first phase of the count. Then nobody can rig it. Tucker Carlson, God bless Tucker Carlson, I hope he keeps his job. He's brought up twice on February 28th and I think April 23rd. First time was a Hillary operative named Philippi Reigns. And he said, hey, if you're so worried about the Russians hacking the computers, why don't we in effect, he said, why don't we have paper ballots and get rid of the computers? He didn't say get rid of the computers explicitly. But he was saying, if we have paper ballots, nobody can hack it. And of course, Philip Reigns, a Democratic operative, says, oh, no, we can't use paper ballots for the next 100 years. And Tucker says, basically, why not? I think you can find these things still online. If you're really concerned about anybody hacking the ballots. But the Democrats in the know and the Rhino Republicans in the know, some of them, they know the system is rigged. They love it to be rigged. And they'll ridicule anybody that brings it up. So first thing is to say the goal is hand-counted paper ballots before the ballots leave the public site. And then you get a real count. And with modern technology, we can stream that count over the internet. And we could also be making ballot images of each ballot as they're counting it. And then you'd have three ways. Even if you had four people at one precinct, they were all Democrats or Republicans, and they wanted to cheat, they wouldn't be able to because of being on film. That means we need about 250,000 websites, one for each precinct. You know, there's 50 states, 3,141 counties, and those counties are divided into little streets, about 10 streets each, and there's your precinct. So that precinct thing that would need 250,000 websites, no problem. There's over 1 billion websites on the internet now. This is as important as going to war. It's more important because the people that win elections decide who is going to, whether we're going to go to war, and they also decide a lot of other things. So that's number one. That's the first thing for Trump to get. That's the first thing. The first thing for Trump to bring up. Second thing is he needs to say in his speeches, we got to demand that the boards of elections stop destroying ballots and ballot images. What? Destroying ballots and ballot images? Yes, that's what boards of elections do these days. It is a massive criminal syndicate. Most of the local people have just been bought in, schmoozed, or whatever by the three companies I'm about to mention that count all of our votes on their secret computer programs. So he needs to say we need the boards of elections to quit destroying the ballots and the ballot images. In Alabama, Judge Roy Moore went up against a quizzical-looking guy named Doug Jones. The deep state deeply feared Judge Roy Moore, and I can't go into why, but he sticks to his beliefs. And they smeared him every way they could. He admitted that he had dated when he was in Vietnam for 5 years in law school. Then in his 30s, he started to date. He dated some girls in their teens, but they were legal age. That happens in Ireland all the time, too. Jerry Seinfeld, when he was 39, was dating a 17-year-old girl. Nobody's demanding that Seinfeld shows all be canceled. I'm not a big fan of hearing that, but it was common in the South then. And, the people that I don't know if I would want a 32-year-old dating my 19-year-old daughter unless it was under very special circumstances. But my point is, it is not a crime. Judge Moore did no crimes, and all those accusations are baloney. So 4 days before the election on December 12th, 2016, only a few months ago, a fellow named John Brakey, who I'm going to mention again, John Brakey initiated a lawsuit or masterminded a lawsuit behind a Republican, Democrat, independent, and a libertarian. And they said to the judge, we want the Secretary of State, Merrill, who was a conservative Republican, we want him not to destroy the ballot images, because all these machines right now being used all over the country can make ballot images. And it's very hard for them to alter those ballot images. We want them to keep the ballot images, this lawsuit said. At noon on December 8th, roughly, the lower court judge said, okay, keep them if you can. It was kind of weak. But then the Secretary of State got it up to the Supreme Court of Alabama 6 hours later, and it was on international news that the Supreme Court of Alabama said, no, it's fine. You can go ahead and destroy the ballot images. Now, that's against federal law. Federal law, which we'll have up on openlettertodonaldtrump.com, I can't remember the number right now, says you must keep all election evidence for 22 months. You must keep all election evidence for 22 months. So here we have those on the Supreme Court of Alabama. I don't remember if it was unanimous or not. They all belong going on their way to jail right now because they all gave the green light. That's okay, Secretary of State Merrill, destroy all the ballots, all the ballot images. Then you try to get to the ballots in Alabama, and if what one lawyer tells me is true, you can't get at them. They say, well, you can't count them by hand. We'll put them back through the computers again. This guy asked me, isn't that a waste of money? They wanted $1 million to put the ballots through the computers again. I said, it's not only a waste of money, it's an insult to our intelligence, So at any rate, then another example, Dr. Laura Presley. She's in Austin, Texas. She ran for city council a few years ago. Circumstances I won't go into. She felt for sure, according to her website and her speeches on YouTube. It's Pressley. It's two S's, not... That tells us she's not Elvis Presley's niece because she has two S's, Dr. Laura Presley. And she went to the Board of Elections because she said, this can't be right. The day or two after the election, she said they had no paper ballots there now, per the absurd in Austin, Texas. She said, I'd like to see the ballot images. And they said, the Board of Elections said, we destroyed them. We destroyed them. So she takes them to court, and in court they say, well, even though it's against federal law, we got permission from the Secretary of State of Texas, who was also a conservative Republican, to destroy the ballots. So the judge at the end of that lower case put a $100,000 fine on Dr. Laura Presley. So she got a $100,000 fine hanging over her head for trying to be able to see some election evidence. We know how frivolous that is when somebody wants to double-check anything to see if the computers publish the right result or a totally phony result. That's frivolous. She got a $100,000 fine. Her suit is now before the Supreme Court of Texas. Interestingly enough, the Attorney General of Texas has come in on Dr. Laura Presley's side, and she's saying she's trying to get the court to rule you can't destroy election evidence. It's already federal law. I believe she said on one of her tapes it's already state law in Texas. So Dr. Laura Presley is someone, if anyone can get to President Trump, that he needs to meet. She's fighting. She's a mother and a grandmother, young-looking grandmother in her early 50s. She's fighting this fight for all of us, and they're mugging her in the dark. President Trump needs to bring her to the White House or when he's in Arizona, see her and make her case, put the spotlight on it. So if the Supreme Court of Texas does what the Supreme Court of Alabama does, people can start to get the picture. And the guy that found this ballot image angle, because our solution at watchthevoteusa.com is paper ballots, hand-counted, no computers in the first step. And they're going to say, oh, we can't do that. It's too hard. We haven't done it for 30, 40, 50 years. But John Brakey found, who's filing lawsuits all over the United States on this, all these machines from the big vendors make a ballot image. And so he is taking suits. They are not allowed to destroy them. Now, Dr. Laura Presley says that the reason they have to destroy them when they're cheating is because the ballot image gets 10 times as big, and any computer person can tell the ballot image has been altered. That's why they gotta destroy them. By the way, a great statistician, Richard Charnon of Florida, has come out and said the chances of Roy Moore losing that Alabama election to Judge Doug Jones was 15 billion to 1. 15 billion to 1 that Roy Moore won, not Doug Jones, based on the activity in the second half of the day in the Democratic areas of Alabama. Laura Presley's is just as absurd, but I don't have time to go into her city council race. And thirdly, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the head of the Democratic Party under Hillary, she was facing like a Bernie Sanders guy, Professor Tim Canova, I believe. And he goes, they thought, boy, this is funny. People out in the precincts, when we walked, they were all mad at Debbie Wasserman Schultz for waiting what they could do to wait it for Hillary. And so they go to get the ballot images. And they say at the Board of Elections in Miami, Florida, I believe, Broward County, they say, we destroyed them. This is 2016, as was Roy Moore's. Laura Presley's was 2014. We destroyed them. And then if they go to court, and they say, well, don't worry, we got the ballots. And when they go to court and get the right to see the ballots, they come to see the ballots and they say, we destroyed those too. There's an article in Politico, if you put in Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Tim Canova, and election, then you'll get this article. And Politico, you'll get this article from Politico, which does a great job. I think I got the story right. I'm doing a lot of this from memory. I think I got it exactly right. But it's a lot of destruction of ballots, okay? So this is happening, and I talked to John Brakey a few times. He's a down-to-earth guy. He's a progressive. He's a Bernie supporter. But like when I work with Jim and Ken Collier, who wrote Vote Scam, The Stealing of America in 1992, I worked with them from 1985 to 1998, and they were super liberals. They loved the 60s and sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and I'm this geeky Catholic guy who hardly talked to girls when I was in college. That's a little exaggeration. But we never once argued on this issue, and I'm not going to have any arguments with John Brakey, even though he's a progressive, because we both see on this, if we're going to have elections, let's count them honestly. But Brakey says they're destroying ballots all over the country. Ballot images, I should say. Ballot images, and in some cases, ballots. Okay, the next thing that President Trump needs to say is, and have all the GOP candidates say, is he needs to have them say, we are coming on Election Day with our workers and computer experts, and on Election Day 2018 and November 2018, we want to see the ballots and the ballot images, and if you've destroyed them, or if you won't let us see them, there's going to be lawsuits and depositions, and we're going to make a lot of noise. Put these boards of election who are stupidly or criminally listening to these three vendors we're about to cover, put them on Front Street, put them in the spotlight. If you destroy the ballot images or ballots, or won't let us get at the ballots, which is what they usually do, if you won't let us get at the ballots, okay, then we will sue. There's going to be depositions, and there's going to be a lot of noise. And if they let me ask the questions or give them some questions for the deposition, we'll put them up on the website eventually, and in case they don't want to talk to me directly or whatever, then it'll be some of the most hilarious depositions in TV you've ever seen, if the judge lets them film it. Number 4 is investigate the 3 big vendors. Now, while most Americans have been unaware, because the networks and the news media won't tell them, from 1973 till now, 3 big vendors ES&S, Election System and Software, out of Omaha, Nebraska, Hearts InterCivic, which is out of Texas, and Dominion, which used to be Diebold, which is out of Canada, count 96% of our counties, 99% of our vote on secret computer programs that they own. And they make the boards of election, the 3,000 plus boards of election who have hired one of these three companies. They all just have to hire one company, even though the three companies have the same rules and look like, to me, the same company under three different corporations. Kind of like if you buy Tide or Cheer washing fluid from P&G wins either way, and it's the same with here. Whichever company you have, they're enforcing the same rules. And they make our Board of Elections sign a thing. We will not look at your computer programs, which are telling the computers what to do on election night. So our boards of elections and Secretary of States in all 50 states, and the boards of elections everywhere except for 5 counties in New Hampshire and maybe a few other very small places in Vermont and West Texas and something like that. I'm not even sure of those other places. But at least in 5 counties in New Hampshire, except for those, all the rest of them and all 50 Secretary of States and all the other boards of elections sign a contract. We will not look at your computer software that tells our computers what to do on election night. Incredible but true. Thankfully, some professors and other people in unimpeachable integrity have put up verifiedvoting.org, and you can go to verifiedvoting.org and see in each county in the United States what company, vendor counts their votes. In Alabama, it was all 67 counties were counted by ES&S, the biggest of the companies. In Ohio, 86 out of the 88, for instance, are counted by these three companies. So they need to be investigated. If Lieutenant Columbo, Sherlock Holmes, and Jim Rockford for Rio, I can tell you the first thing Lieutenant Columbo would say: who are these 3 private companies that are counting our votes on their secret software, and we can't get at the ballots or ballot images to check them, and why have the boards of elections all signed to let them do this? That's what Columbo and Sherlock Holmes and Jim Rockford would say if they were real. Okay, and I'm going to have to go short because I'm running out of time here in this hour. He's got to put this. Trump should next put on the spotlight on the fake media, the 5 TV networks, because all of their pretended competition to call winners and losers in the last 30 years is fake, and they know it's fake. These 5 TV networks and AP Wire, which sends all the stories of national import to the local papers, they own another company you've never heard of, National Election Pool. You can Google that. And they own that company, and that company does or supervises all the exit polls. So the networks get the exact same information on the exit polls at the exact same time, okay, from the exact same company, which they jointly own or control. National Election Poll. That's why they haven't told you. The news media is in on this, and they wait to get the results from, in effect, the 3 big vendors, even though it's through the counties who all just let a ticker tape come out and they believe it. And anyone, since your cell phone can call California and get calls from Maine, they can go into all these election computers, or most of them, from satellite or cell phone technology and alter results during the day when the local people are 10 feet away and don't know what's happening. All this is on electionnightgatekeepers.com. Okay, the electionnightgatekeepers.com goes into this in depth. And watchthevoteusa.com, that's watchthevoteusa.com, we've submitted a support report to the Presidential Election Commission, okay, before Trump shut it down. For some reason, they got him to shut it down in January, but we submitted before he shut it down. And he should read that. Everybody should read that because it tells exactly what needs to be done in the first 4 essays, especially 2 and 3. What needs to be done, and that's what should be implemented all over the country, legislation and so forth. The Election Commission should be reconstituted under someone who can do it full time, have 2 hearings like they did up in New Hampshire a few months ago before it was shut down, and then we could introduce legislation to the Congress and the states to get this straightened out once and for all. Kick these 3 vendors and all central computer companies out so we would have honest elections. The 6th point and last point that Trump needs to bring up in his talks is tell everybody to get the documentary Hacking Democracy. It's an HBO documentary, believe it or not. It's available on Amazon and elsewhere. I think it's about $19. It turned out to be masterminded by Bev Harris of Black Box Voting. And Harry Hursty was the world's most famous legal computer hacker. And he is kind of the star at the end of that movie. If everyone would get Hacking Democracy and watch this, it would set the nation on fire. By the way, Harry Hursty, along with Professor Appel of Princeton and Professor Rivost of MIT, were all testified in the last 2 hours of the New Hampshire Presidential Election Commission, Election Integrity Commission hearing before Trump shut it down. And you can find that on YouTube. So Trump needs to tell everybody, get Hacking Democracy, at HBO documentary. They can hardly call that to be fringe. There's one little part of Hacking Democracy I want to mention that implies something that is not right. Near the end of the movie, they have, I believe, somebody's telling about John Kerry talking to Jesse Jackson in the 2004 election, and it is implied, not said overtly, but implied that the Bush family controls the election computers. The Bush family does not control the election computers. Neither does Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton. These people are too low in the New World Order hierarchy and the shadow government hierarchy to be given that kind of power. Who does have the ability to control all the elections? That would be ES&S, Election System and Software, Hearts InterCivic, and Dominion, which used to be Diebold, the three major companies who own the software. They're the ones who have the ability to rig the election. Now, I think we got about 5 minutes left. I think we end here about 10:58.
Yeah. 10:58.
Okay. Well, I'm hearing yes there. And so I'm going to tell you several things real quick here. Why did they let Trump win the election? They could have easily stolen it, because remember, they're looking at the computer results before they tell the local county computers what to print on the little ticker tape, and the counties and anybody else has any way to check it. They could have easily said, oh, Trump lost by a percentage point in Florida. Hillary won by a percentage and a half in Pennsylvania, and so forth, but they didn't. On 9 o'clock that night, and this is a guess, I don't have inside information, but the New York Times, my friend Gary in Texas, who's a great researcher on his own, and he probably taught me more that I didn't know than any other person alive. Gary called me and he said the New York Times website has just changed its projection from 93% for Hillary, 87% for Hillary to 93% for Trump. Okay, and then I knew that they were standing down. And I had told a bunch of people I thought they were going to stand down because the big crowds that Trump got for 14 months versus Hillary's no crowds, okay? Those big crowds versus Hillary's no crowds, the angry crowds, the righteously angry crowds. Then you had Hillary collapsing and all the signs out in the country, 1,000 to 1 in the rural areas for Trump. Then you had Hillary collapsing, and that was like a godsend that everybody saw how sick she was, that to help people not believe how she, then she's the most despicable character in the history of television that's run for president on a major party. And remember, Trump brought up the vote fraud and had everybody thinking about vote fraud, even if they weren't thinking about it too precisely. And finally, Steve Pajanic came on YouTube. The White Hats came on and said that, they called the White Hats, we're going to make sure the Clintons don't take the White House. And if you remember those watching that night, 2:45, John Podesta, the little weasel, Clinton's aide, came out and said, we're not conceding till morning. This is 2:45 a.m. Eastern. We will not concede till morning. Go home. Hillary will dress you in the morning. She was sedated. There's a lot of rumors because she was screaming and she knew she was losing. Well, it turns out that a half hour later, Trump comes walking out, and the first thing he says is, complicated business, folks, complicated business. Hillary has just called me and conceded. So I believe and they started calling for his impeachment the next day. The ruling elite knew that if they didn't stand down, millions of people were going to be listening to people like me soon. How did Dud Hillary win this thing? Okay? So those are what Trump needs to bring up. We're getting down to something like less than 2 minutes here, so I'm going to say that there's that old famous quote, and so everybody help us. You can be part of this election. Help us get the Tucker Carlson, Trump, one of the Trump family members. If you know somebody who knows somebody, or if you know him, tell them to look at openlettertodonaldtrump.com. There's that old quote from Joe Stalin that says, the communist dictator of of Russia from 1922 to 1953. He said, "Those who cast the votes decide nothing. Those who count the votes decide everything." Let me repeat that. Those who cast the votes decide everything. Excuse me. Those who cast the votes decide nothing. Those who count the votes decide everything. So let's get them away from these big computer companies and count the votes again in our neighborhood precincts, like we basically did the first 180 years of our elections, and then we'll have honest, at least duly elected politicians. Finally, and I'm kind of taking this from Jim Collier, who died in 1998, the author of Vote Scam, The Stealing of America book in 1992. He said, "Millions of people have fought and bled and died so that we as Americans can be free to determine our destiny and free, transparent, and honest elections." And he said, "We dare not let," and I'm going to update it, "we dare not let these 5 TV networks and the 3 vendors, AS&S, Hart, and Dominion, continue to spit on the sacrifice of these people." See you next week at 10 o'clock. Jim Condit Jr. for Congress.